Afternoon. Again, my name is Sarah Lincoln, and I am a program and policy analyst in the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation here in Wisconsin. And I co-lead all transition activities for the division with WDA Director Deanna Krell. So some of you may know Deanna as well, but her and I co-lead all transition-related activities. So I'm here to talk to you today about DVR and the transition services that we offer. I'm trying to advance the slide, and it doesn't appear to be working. Oh, there we go. Thank you. So the learning targets for today is understanding DVR's referral and application process, learning about our eligibility criteria, talking about DVR transition services, and then I'm here to answer any questions that you might have. Please go ahead and type them into the chat box, and we'll address them as they come up. And if some of them don't seem appropriate for where we are in the slides, we'll address them at the end. Next slide. Okay, what is DVR? DVR stands for the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, and we are a state agency underneath the Department of Workforce Development. Our funding is 80% federal from the Rehab Services Administration, and that is matched with 20% state general purpose revenue dollars. And the DVR program is regulated under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act from the Rehab Services Administration on the federal level. Our mission is to assist individuals with disabilities to obtain, maintain, or improve their employment. And we provide services to individuals to become successful in competitive integrated employment. Next slide. Who is DVR? Again, our mission is to assist individuals with disabilities to prepare for secure, retain, and regain employment. And we do that by providing services directly to consumers, employers, and some of our other workforce partners. DVR achieves this mission by providing employment services and counseling to people with disabilities, and we provide and arrange for a broad array of services to enable an individual to go to work. Again, this work is in an integrated, competitive environment, and we also provide resources in order for individuals to get access to training and or other kinds of technical assistance to employers regarding disability issues. So we provide these services. The staff that DVR employs are vocational counselors, and these are master's degree counselors with a professional counseling license. We also have case coordinators that kind of help us with some of the fiscal processes that we need to do, as well as some following up with consumers, and managers that oversee the work of all of these folks. We have a very small central office staff that oversees the program from a state level. And then, as many of you know, we do contract with providers to provide some very specific services that we offer to our consumers. Oops. So referral and application process. What we recommend is that high school students should apply to DVR at least 2 years prior to them ending their school services. So 2 years prior to them exiting, which oftentimes means 2 years prior to graduation. That doesn't mean that if an individual is younger than that they shouldn't apply sooner. If you have a student that has some employment interests before 2 years prior to them exiting, they can be referred to DVR as well. And DVR counselors can also be invited to IEP meetings to talk about the different kinds of resources that DVR will provide once an individual applies for and becomes eligible for VR, without that person actually being a DVR consumer. So if you wanted to bring a DVR counselor in at age 14 to an IEP meeting to talk to the team and the student about the kinds of services that DVR can provide when they are ready to apply, that is a completely acceptable process, and we really encourage our DVR counselors to be invited to those kinds of meetings, even before the consumer is going to be applying for services. If the student is under the age of 18 or they are 18 and have a guardian, the legal guardian must sign all the documents for them to be referred to DVR. There is an online referral process, and that can be accessed through the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation web page. So if you go into the DVR web page and you select the services area, and there's a drop-down offered, you go under Voc Rehab, and then there is a section that says how to apply. Click there, and that will take you through our referral process. There is also information there if you don't want to do the online referral. You can simply print out a referral and mail it in. And once you submit a referral, the local DVR office will contact you to set up an orientation session and to schedule those initial meetings. So who is eligible? To be eligible, you must have a documented medical or psychological disability that prevents a barrier to employment in order for you to require DVR services. So the DVR staff and the applicant will work together to gather some needed information. If you don't have documentation of your disability, we can certainly help get that. We will need to get releases of information in order to get written documentation. We'll use existing information whenever possible. So again, most of our students that come to DVR have a school IEP, and so we will ask for the student to sign a release of information so that we can get that from the school. If the student is connected to long-term support services under a waiver, or they're getting county services, then we can get access to their functional screen records, or any of the other records that are connected to those long-term supports kinds of services in order to help us determine eligibility. And we can also use previous medical records if the individual has those handy and has access to them. We can also refer applicants for additional assessments if needed. So if a student says, you know, I'm fairly certain that I have a medical disability, we can certainly pay for and do an assessment in order to determine that, and pay for that kind of documentation if they don't already have it. But when they do have it, we don't want to run students through an extra step of gathering it, so we're going to use existing information whenever possible. So there are two steps to getting services from DVR. The first one is going through the referral and eligibility process. And then once that is determined that you are eligible, then we move on to the next step, which is our order of selection. And you may have heard it also being referred to as OOS. And so the OOS process takes a look at how a person's disability affects 7 different areas that are related to work. And so the 7 different areas that the order of selection looks at are mobility, communication, self-care, self-direction, interpersonal skills and acceptance, work tolerance, and work skills. So the individual counselor will take a look at ask the individual some questions, look at these 7 different areas that are related to work, and make a determination of where they fall within our order of selection. We are required by federal law to serve those with the most serious limitations due to their disability first, and so that is written into our law. So we do serve those people first. If we are in the area of having a wait list, then we, if we have a wait list, then we prioritize them based on their disability. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to pause for one quick second and relocate. Give me 1 second. Does anybody have any questions with what I've covered so far?
So far, no questions. Chat box.
Okay. Okay.
Feel free to put questions in the chat box, everyone, because we can answer those right away for you.
Okay. So I'm sorry about that. I had to move quickly. I didn't realize I was in a place that wasn't good for my entire hour. So, okay. So currently in DVR, we do not have a wait list for anyone that falls into categories 1 and 2 of our order of selection. And the third category, we currently have a very small wait list on, and we do contact those individuals annually and ask them if they're still interested in DVR services or if they want to be removed from the wait list. So this slide goes through the different categories in our order of selection. Category 1, again, is the consumer with the most significant disability. And as you can see on the slide, it says if a mental or physical impairment exists that seriously limits 4 or more functional capacities in terms of an employment outcome, and they require our services, multiple services, over an extended period of time, they fall into Category 1. And if we were in a waitlist situation, Category 1 consumers would be served first. Category 2 means that a consumer has a significant disability. Again, the same definition, if a mental or physical impairment exists that seriously limits, and for Category 2, it's 1 to 3 functional capacities in terms of an employment outcome, and they require our multiple services over an extended period of time, they fall into Category 2. For Category 3, those are all other eligible consumers who do not have a disability that seriously limits 1 or more functional capacities, and they do not require multiple services over an extended period of time. This also includes all consumers who may have a disability that seriously limits 1 or more functional capacity, but again, they do not require multiple services over an extended period of time. So once an individual goes through eligibility and their order of selection is determined, then they meet with a counselor, and we talk to them about what are their barriers to employment, what is their employment goal, and through that process, we develop an individualized plan for employment. And unfortunately, the acronym for our plan is an IPE, and we do know that that is very close to the individual education plan for schools, the IEP. So students that are in transition will have, and working with DVR, will have an IPE and an IEP. And it is important that these 2 plans really have a similar job goal, that the school and DVR are working together, really collaboratively around the students so that we're both able to serve them in the best way possible. So DVR helps consumers to develop a plan to get a job, keep a job, or again, get a better job. So DVR is all about planning. If you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. So that's a good quote that that I like to put into our presentation, because really all the services that DVR can provide are included in our individualized plan for employment. So what can we do? There's lots of things we can do, and this slide goes through some of the more of the common areas services that we use for students in transition. So guidance and counseling, transition to work services for students with disabilities in high school, and we work very collaboratively with schools in order to do that. We can provide rehab tech, transportation, we can provide training for post-secondary education kinds of opportunities. We can provide interpreter services in order for an individual to access our services. And so this slide, again, I'm not going to read all of them, but it goes through lots of the different kinds of examples of the services that DVR can provide. And again, this is just a sample. This isn't all-inclusive. So DVR services for transition age youth. With the passage of WIOA, or the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, that was passed in July of 2014, we now have a new requirement to serve youth in high school ages 14 to 21. And there are very specific services that we are required to provide to them, and they are called pre-employment transition services. And DVR has this requirement, and so does the schools. So DVR works with the local school districts to deliver pre-employment transition services for high school aged youth, as well as students up to the age of 21 that are in a post-secondary educational training program. The new requirement under WIOA is that DVR spends 15% of our federal allocation specifically on providing pre-employment transition services to students in high school or post-secondary educational training program. So in the past, DVR has always been providing these kinds of services to students, but now we do have a federal mandate that actually indicates that we have to spend a very specific amount of dollars on those services to these students, and we're required to track these specific services and report that to our Rehab Services Administration. So what are the pre-employment transition services? They are job exploration counseling, work-based learning experiences, counseling on opportunities for transition or post-secondary education or higher educational training programs, workplace readiness training to develop social skills and independent living, and instruction in self-advocacy, and that may include peer mentoring. So these are the 5 categories of pre-employment transition services. Within the IEP, there is the transition portion of the IEP called the PTP, which is the post-secondary transition planning portion of the IEP. And we did in the last year align the PTP with these pre-employment transition services. We work directly with DPI in order to do that. And so when students are working on filling out their PTP, they're going to be identifying services that fall under these 5 different categories as well. Because again, as I mentioned, WIOA requires that schools and VR work collaboratively to provide these pre-employment transition services to students. So when DVR is providing services, not just to students, but to any of our consumers, we need to look at any comparable benefits. And so comparable benefits are other sources in the community that are providing the same sort of services that DVR would provide otherwise. So an example of that would be financial aid. So there is financial aid is a comparable benefit that consumers may have access to in order to pay for schooling. And so DVR does require that anyone that is asking for us to pay for school applies for financial aid. And so what happens is there is an entire formula that is developed. The student applies for financial aid, and then we look at what financial aid will pay for, and then DVR can provide dollars to help supplement what financial aid does not pay for. Transit service or transportation services is also another area that is a comparable benefit. So if an individual lives in an area where they can access the bus and the student is able to access the bus and it works within their time frame of needing to access transportation services, then we would look at that as a comparable benefit. Health insurance is also a comparable benefit. If somebody has health insurance and that health insurance covers something like eyeglasses, then DVR would ask that the consumer use those health insurance resources to pay for glasses before DVR would pay for them. But if somebody did not have health insurance, then DVR could pay for glasses if that was part of their barriers to employment in order to reach their job goal. We also do cost sharing between agencies. So when we talked about schools are required to provide transition services around pre-employment transition kinds of services, and so is VR. Oftentimes we're able to work out some cost sharing agreements where a student may be accessing job development services from their school during the school day, and then they might need additional services at night or on the weekends, then DVR can come in and provide those services. And so it really is a cost sharing and collaborative approach to providing services to individuals who are our common customers. So DVR's employment planning and consultation services for transition students, what are they? And we'll get into that next. So transition looks different for all of our students. And again, our services are very individualized. And so what one student gets is not guaranteed that somebody else will get it. It just depends, again, on the specific barriers of that individual and the resources that they have access to. So it looks different for each one of our students. And so, again, just wanted to stress the individualized aspect to DVR. So the end goal for DVR is competitive integrated employment. So the definition of that is full or part-time work at minimum wage or higher with wages and benefits similar to those without disabilities performing the same work and fully integrated with co-workers without disabilities. So DVR does not support any kind of segregated work or work that is paid at sub-minimum wage. We only support individuals that are looking at competitive integrated employment, and that may look different for different consumers. We do provide supported employment services, so for that person, their work may look a little different than it would for someone else. They may be only working a few hours a week. Really is based on their ability. But again, that work will be happening in a community-based kind of environment for at least minimum wage or higher. So this gets into our supported employment services. They get in-depth assistance with job development in the community. The DVR supported employment services are provided through our contracted job development agencies or individual contractors. And the job development is based on the consumer's interests and abilities. On-the-job supports are provided by a job coach, or it could be a coworker, either paid or unpaid, based on that individual's needs. The job must pay at least minimum wage or what is the going rate for that position for that employer. But again, we don't have it's not required that it be full-time or part-time. It really is based on what that particular individual is able to do. So part of supported employment is customized employment. And customized employment really relies on a process of discovery. So the individual will go through a process of where they'll be looking at their strengths, abilities, what is the interest of the job seeker, and if this person has very complex and significant disabilities, we really want to look at what are the areas that this person has skills and talents, and how can we help that individual identify some job areas that they may have a specific interest in. We then do a different kind of job development where we'll have a job developer go out and talk to employers about some unmet needs that that employer might have, and then talk about the very specific skills and abilities that our job seeker has that will assist that employer in fulfilling some sort of job need that they may otherwise not have recognized that they needed. So oftentimes we find that coworkers of individuals that work in customized kinds of employment really love having somebody come in because it is addressing some unmet needs in the workplace, or they're able to give up some tasks that they otherwise didn't have time for, or this consumer really had a special skill in that area, and so it relieves some responsibilities of some of the employers that were already working in that job environment. Supports on the job is provided by the employer to the extent it's provided to any employee, and then it's supplemented through a job coach or through paying a co-worker for natural coaching supports. So again, if the individual working in customized employment needs services above and beyond what the employer is providing to other employees, then DVR could help pay for a job coach or, again, pay another co-worker for natural supports, either paid or unpaid, for those kinds of individualized needs. Again, that there is an emphasis on involving family and friends within the discovery process to help identify potential employers to that approach. So customized employment really is a very specific kind of service that DVR does provide to those with really complex and significant disabilities. So helpful tools and key practices for transition. We do have some very specific services that are transition focused. So there is on-the-job training kinds of opportunities. And for students, we call them student on-the-job training. And those are for students that are in high school. And DVR can offer wages to individuals in order to try out some on-the-job training so that the individual employer is not required to pay that individual, but DVR will pay for that. We also help set up work experiences with the high school, and so that can be done collaboratively. We provide job coaching, solid career research. We provide job development services. Again, we talked about either supported or customized can be provided. We have business service consultants that are working for DVR, that are really out there in the community working with employers, talking to them about the benefits of hiring individuals with disabilities, including students with disabilities. We have some specialized and unique training programs that we offer. There is the Walgreens Ready program, some place and train programs, Project Search, which is a great program around the state that is continuing to expand, that the focus is really on high school students that are involved in an internship rotation within a business-led environment. These students that participate in Project Search are completely immersed into the business. They do not go back to the high school for services. They have a classroom component right within the business. And these students then go through 3 different kinds of internship rotations within the business. And then they graduate, oftentimes being hired by that business. And if they're not, there is a job development portion of the Project Search curriculum where we are reaching out and doing job development and providing those services post Project Search. We also have some great summer work activities that DVR is doing. Many of those encompass pre-employment transition services, and those are continuing to expand around the state as we are reaching that 15% pre-employment transition services expenditure requirement that I referenced earlier. And so we really we're looking at getting students involved in those summer work activities, because we do know that for our students that school really is their #1 priority. And so having them access our services on the weekends, in the evenings, or during the summer is really what we have found to be the most beneficial for our transition age students. So again, DVR can attend IEP meetings for students who are not DVR consumers, but they're thinking of applying for services in the future. So I talked about that one already. And employment planning consultation can be provided for any student with a disability. Again, they don't have to be a student with an IEP. They can be any student with a disability. We can provide planning and consultation with them. We do have regular meetings at the high school. Each one of the high schools, the public high schools around the state, has a DVR liaison, and those DVR liaison counselors are working with the schools in order to set up office hours. Many of them have a very set schedule where they are at a particular high school 1 day a month. And we coordinate directly with the schools in order to make sure that students are aware of who the DVR counselor is, as well as the teachers, the guidance counselors, making sure that we have a recognizable face within our high school so that we can provide services in a collaborative way. We can also attend parent-teacher conference nights, transition fairs, open houses, those kinds of things in order to provide DVR information. So it's not just happening at IEP meetings, but we do really want to make sure that everyone that needs our services is aware that we are there and that we're here to help. So when does a person end services with DVR? So once an individual has maintained employment for a minimum of 90 days, DVR can consider to close their case successfully. That doesn't mean that all individuals that have been employed for 90 days have their case closed. There are often instances where DVR will follow them along, especially in those supported employment and customized employment kinds of situations, where we will follow them a little bit beyond that 90 days, just to make sure that it is a good job match, and to see if they need any other services from DVR. So for consumers in supported or customized employment, the 90-day time frame of us following them along begins when they transition to long-term support. So for individuals that have significant disabilities, most of the time they are connected to long-term support services like family care or the IRIS program. And so we know that those individuals are going to require ongoing job supports kinds of services. And so when we do the transition to long-term support, then the long-term support program picks up paying for and really monitoring those kinds of job support services after the consumer has a closed case with DVR. Now, once a person has a closed case with DVR, that doesn't mean that we are done with them. They do have an opportunity for post-employment services. So if an individual is working in a job and the employer wants to add another job task to that individual's employment, and that person needs a little bit of extra job coaching in order to master that new component of their job, they can come back for post-employment services. Those services need to be for a job that they were closed in, and it needs to be for services that are time limited and very specific. So that's what post-employment services are. If they need to come back for a much more full array of services, then they would reapply for DVR and start as a new case. And you can do that anytime. There is no set number of times that you can come back to DVR. You can come back to us anytime that you require our services. So we do have some very specific resources around transition within DVR. So we do have our statewide transition action and resource team. It's called our START team. And that is a team of counselors that are located around the state that really are experts in providing transition services to students in high school. And so they really are the experts in our WDAs around providing supports to other counselors that are providing transition services as well. We do have a link listed there where you can see who our statewide transition action resource team is. And then again, I also referenced that we had a liaison to every public high school in the state. And so there's a link there that takes you to that list in case you were wondering who your DVR liaison is within your school. So that link is on our website as well. So that is the information that I had to share with you today. Are there any questions out there?
I haven't seen any questions come in yet, but feel free to enter your questions into the chat box before we finish up today.
And if you do have any questions beyond this PowerPoint, please feel free to contact me. My email is sarahj.lincoln@dwd.wisconsin.gov. And again, if you signed up for this presentation today, I do believe that my email was included in there as well.
And was that sarahj.lincoln?
Yes, sarahj.lincoln@dwd.wisconsin.gov.
Okay.
And Sarah with an H.
Into the chat box, and
great.
So if you check the chat box, the email should be in there.
I apologize for that not being on the question slide. My contact info should have been there.
No problem. Okay, so if there are no questions, that will conclude our webinar for today. Thank you so much for joining us. We have over 85 trainings and webinars for 2017. So check our website calendar regularly and register for our upcoming trainings. Please keep an eye out for the short evaluation that will come to you later this afternoon, as well as the recording of today's very useful webinar. And thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you so much for listening. Take care.
Take Take care. Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.